We have more for your ears only. I'm David Alpern.
I'm Mark Garber. Quote from the news. The FBI has said if we knew everything we know now back then, we still would have done the same thing. And I couldn't disagree with that more. That was Democratic Congressman William Keating on a new intelligence community report of failures to fully follow up Russian warnings about the man behind the Boston Marathon bombing a year ago this week. Now this.
Because of the civil rights movement, because of the laws President Johnson signed, new doors of opportunity and education swung open for everybody. Not all at once, but they swung open. Not just blacks and whites, but also women and Latinos and Asians and Native Americans and gay Americans and Americans with a disability. They swung open for you, and they swung open for me.
The first African-American president of the United States put an appropriately personal touch to his remarks at the Lyndon Johnson Presidential Library's three-day Civil Rights Summit last week, marking 50 years since LBJ orchestrated passage of the landmark 1964 Civil Rights Act. Also participating were past presidents Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, and George Bush, civil rights fighters of the past, and those who carry the mission forward.
A key figure behind the summit was Elizabeth Christian, president of the LBJ Foundation and daughter of LBJ Press Secretary George Christian. And to sum up the event and the roadmap it helped develop for future action, for your ears only, she joins us now. Ms. Christian, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
How many people would you estimate attended the summit, in addition to the millions who could watch key parts on their home screens?
Well, what's interesting is that the LBJ auditorium is not that big. It's less than 1,000 people in its capacity, but it is the historic site where we've heard from everybody from Lyndon Johnson to Mikhail Gorbachev to several of the presidents who visited us this past week, and we were committed to having this event in our own auditorium. So throughout the three-day series of panels and presidential addresses, I'm going to guess that we had 1,500 to 2,000 people through the auditorium. That's why we knew it was so important that we really opened the doors to tremendous press coverage, live stream, feeding the pool live so that television could cover it. We really wanted a window on this event from the nation's media.
There's also continuing internet access to what the LBJ Library calls a historic moments exhibit on the 1964 Civil Rights Act. What's in it?
That is a wonderful exhibit that is an effort between Google and the National Archives. And if you want to visit it, go to google.com/cultural institute and then look for the LBJ information, which is terrific. You can zoom in, get up close, you can see the staples, you can see the ink smears, you can see the documents that were really important during that time of civil rights. You can also visit, while you're there, some of the world's greatest museums. It is a very fun site to surf around on. Our focus, of course, has been the LBJ information, and it's really terrific.
Well, many of us saw at least parts of the presidential speeches, so let's look at some of the panels that considered the civil rights challenges of our new century. The first was on gay marriage, where there has been considerable legislative and judicial progress. What came through most strongly?
What came through most strongly was that we had participants on that panel who have actually opposed each other in past lives. The attorneys, Ted Olson and David Boies, who were actually on the opposite sides of the Gore v. Bush Supreme Court case, came together on the issue of gay marriage. And the most really touching part of the whole panel was when Mr. Boies described that a witness for, again, a man who had been against gay marriage testified under oath that, in fact, not being able to have gay marriage was hurting people. It was toxic. It was damaging. When the words like damaging and destructive started coming out, apparently they knew they had their case won.
Another panel was on immigration, where current political divisions seem even more resistant to reform than Southern opposition to civil rights that LBJ had to work around. What struck you most in that discussion?
What I really appreciated in that discussion was Governor Haley Barbour's comments that we have loaded up the exchange with code words. One side wants to talk about we have to have a border security, but they don't talk really substantively about the people who overstay their visas, which is a huge issue. In fact, as many as 45% of people who are in the country here, quote, illegally, close quote, are overstayers of their visas. So it doesn't have anything to do with border security the way you think of it in Texas with a big fence.
Well, to what degree was it noted that President Obama mentioned Latinos in his remarks, but not their pressure on him to cut back record deportations?
He did not address specifically that issue, but he certainly did talk about the issues of immigration and equal rights for Americans.
Underlying last week's Civil Rights Summit, it's been widely reported, was the desire of the LBJ family, your foundation, and friends to shift attention away from the disastrous Vietnam War that often overshadows Johnson's domestic achievements and tormented the president himself, we've learned by notes and recordings. But I wonder if there is some solace in the way the errors of that war have become a major warning sign about military intervention in our even more dangerous age of terrorism, nuclear missiles, other weapons of mass destruction. Could you see Lyndon on high saying, "Don't do what I did"?
I think that's a terrific perspective on this, and I'm glad you brought it up. Nobody has ever swept the issue of Vietnam under the rug. President Johnson would be very angry with our whole foundation crew if we ever tried to ignore Vietnam or pretend like it didn't happen or public relations ourselves through it. That's just not what he wanted to do. He wanted a museum that was kind of with the bark off. In other words, all the warts exposed. All that said, it really is time as a country to think about the really wonderful things he did, these 1,000 pieces of legislation that affect us to this day, everything from the National Endowment for the Arts to public broadcasting to sweeping environmental legislation, the most environmental legislation since Theodore Roosevelt.
Elizabeth Christian is president of the LBJ Foundation and daughter of LBJ Press Secretary George Christian.
Quote from the news, further evidence that we don't have our house in order when it comes to Internet security. That was Edward Felton of Princeton on a computer flaw called Heartbleed in many major websites and linked devices threatening consumer data, although large black market sales of such information has not been noticed yet.
Next, the Afghan surprise, what their election means for America. For your ears only.